Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our how-to series, we're going to look at the care that is conveyed in getting angry on someone else's behalf and the important function this plays in good mental health. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I'll get back to you personally. And finally, you can reserve a place in one of my seminars or get any of my PDFs at www.crushingdoubt.org. In many instances in my life, I have to say, my fondest wish wasn't always around something positive. While I would prefer to wish for something positive, there were times where there simply could not be something positive brought out of a given situation. This is certainly true with trauma. During those times, my fondest wish was to be understood, validated, and to feel that the other person really thought about what was happening for me and empathized with my situation. After years of looking at what is most important in therapy, I've come to understand that good therapy must be what is known as trauma-informed. Sadly, many therapists out there do not qualify. Why not? Because they have a viewpoint that does not factor in trauma, which means to recognize that when an emotional experience overwhelms us or makes us feel unsafe, we literally shift into a completely different way of thinking. We cannot think the same way when we are in trauma. When therapy is not trauma-informed, you may find yourself working on aspects of the work that are either not all that relevant or that cannot be utilized because you have been driven into a mindset in which you can't think well or can't take in new information because you are what I call in trauma. So I'm not going to beat around the bush about this because I've experienced it myself. If your therapist isn't sure if they're trauma-informed, they aren't. People who are trauma-informed know they are because they understand it. And if they aren't trauma-informed, they're likely going to have a very hard time helping you at some of the most key moments in all of therapy. At best, they will be wasting a lot of time barking up the wrong tree, and at worst, they won't recognize when they are reenacting trauma themselves. Let me say that again because it's very important that I highlight this. The therapist can reenact trauma themselves. That's not something that should be happening in therapy, and you need to be seeing a therapist who is trauma-informed to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, I had this occur with the psychoanalyst I saw for 9.5 years. And you may ask yourself, why did I keep going to see this person if he was reenacting the trauma? The reason is, I didn't know he was reenacting the trauma. It took a long time to sort that out for me, and I'm going to give you a sense of how I figured that out. And a lot of it relates to the fact that he never would get angry on my behalf. I'll talk about that in a second. I did get a lot out of the therapy, I will admit, but that was largely to my credit. I did a lot of work. He gave me some new information that could have easily been condensed into probably 6 months, maybe less, 4 months. And it would have been much better absorbed if I hadn't been getting re-traumatized again and again by his dismissals, his lack of recognition or acknowledgement of my suffering, and much more. This is what can happen at its worst in a non-trauma-informed treatment. He saw my trauma responses as abnormal, negative, very negative actually, or even a sign of something more deeply wrong within my embedded personality. It started to feel like he really didn't like me, and I'm convinced that he didn't, but I think that wasn't because I'm not likable. That was because he wasn't trauma-informed. Now, to avoid getting re-traumatized, you should go into therapy knowing that this can happen in therapy with a therapist who's not trained in trauma work. They can quite literally interpret you completely incorrectly in profoundly damaging ways and shocking ways that can leave some people devastated for life or at the very least untrusting of therapists and unwilling to go back to see them. It is imperative that we all listen for trauma and learn to and honor, in the case of therapists, what the patient has to say when something feels so badly to the patient that they're stuck on it. In a big or a small way, that is always a sign that we stop and we listen. Trauma-informed people understand. When the patient's hurting, we stop and we listen and we trust them. This is one of the key aspects of the difference between a trauma-informed therapist and one who is not trauma-informed. A trauma-informed therapist inherently trusts the patient. Trauma-informed work in that way is truly collaborative because of that two-way trust. In fact, in trauma-informed work, there's also a lot of self-disclosure because we need to help the patient trust us And how can they do that if they don't know us at all? So what does this mean for you as a chronic pain sufferer? Well, a huge part of the power column work I do is to help people accept the fullness of their trauma. I talk about that all the time, and I do get some questions. What does that actually mean? Well, accepting the fullness of your trauma involves understanding what actually happened to you more fully. You may think you do, but I think usually that takes a lot of work. Now, with that bad therapist I actually had to recognize the fullness of my trauma by so having had enough of his disavowed aggression and gaslighting that I could actually see the reenactment of the trauma happening. Ironically, the fact that he was a bad therapist is the thing that helped me see the trauma. But that's not the way I would have drawn it up. It could have gone very, very badly, and it does for many people. Now, at first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing because I really trusted that, ostensibly at least, he was supposed to be trying to help me. I even believed that he was meaning to help me, but he didn't understand what he needed to understand. So the fact is, he probably thought he was helping me, but his ignorance of trauma, along with his numerous other problems, I have to say, like his condemnation of aggression, made it impossible for him to do so. So, do you know how I finally recognized what was going on? How I recognized the reenactment and the fact that it was trauma? The man simply could not, no matter what the circumstances were, be angry on my behalf. Actually, I'll tell you a little story. We just had our second kid, and I was getting her out of the car, holding the car seat on a Brooklyn street. In a Brooklyn street, you take kids out of that car all the time in this way. And a car came and hit the car door. I had to lean into the car to avoid getting hit myself. I told him this story, and he said, well, it seems like you weren't being careful enough. Look, whether I was being careful enough wasn't the point. I think I was being careful enough anyway. The point was somebody hit the car door because they weren't driving carefully. He was making the victim the one who was at fault, and that's what happens in non-trauma informed work. So I even pointed this out to him about his problem with aggression. I said it directly. And he dismissed this as my needing too much from him or having a strange fascination with aggression. So within the next few years after firing him, I came to see that what I had felt in my body and in my mind had been true all along. His failure to be angry at the people who had hurt me was exactly what I thought it was. An indication of a lack of actual care about me. Think about your very favorite people. Would you be angry if someone hurt them? Unless you're someone who is extremely uncomfortable with anger and needs to keep it unconscious, the answer is yes. If someone hurts my kids, not only is that offending person in the doghouse for the rest of their lives, unless they really own up to it, but I'll simply do my best to not end up in jail. I say that jokingly. Now, of course, I won't actually physically attack them, but that's the wish. That's what comes out when you're angry on someone else's behalf. Even if people hurt my kids in a minor way, because that is how much I care about them. So this is an important point. The level of anger I have is not a sign of an anger problem. It's a sign of how much I care. The same is true of my closest friends, of my wife, of the family members who care about me, of the hometown I love even. I'll defend it tooth and nail. It's true of the pets we love, the teachers and mentors who cared about us, or other people who gave us so much, or to whom we are grateful for their past care. This is how I feel about the people I work with as well. I am angry that things have hurt them, and I will use my knowledge and system to get them the proper revenge of relief, success, peace, and happiness. So I'm not advocating for fighting, but I am advocating for being angry when people that I care about are hurt. We always have loyalty to the people we most care about, and you simply can't help from getting angry when someone you care about has been hurt by another person. This doesn't have to be expressed externally to the person doing the hurting. In fact, usually there's no point. But I want to put in a plug for a major way that we can help people with their trauma. Voice your anger aloud to the person you care about, that you're angry that they got hurt. Very few things will make a person feel more cared about than that. This is, in fact, the definition of being in someone's corner. If you don't show up at times like that, people will feel it. And even worse, if they have doubts about their own right to be angry in the first place, they will see it as confirmation that they do not deserve to be angry. This is one of the things that happened to me in my childhood over and over. No one understood why I was angry, or very few people validated it, and that made me doubt myself. Getting angry on someone else's behalf is a major form of empathy. So remember, the difference between sympathy and empathy is that empathy is when we actually sink into the feeling with the person. Sympathy is when we kind of are like, yeah, I understand. We say it in words. Those of you out there who are not suffering from chronic pain but watching this, maybe you're trying to learn about what's going on for the person in your life who is suffering chronic pain, or maybe you're just interested. If you aren't angry at the sufferer's pain, or angry at the professionals who have failed to help them, or angry at the people who haven't empathized with them, then you're not caring as much as you should be. Take this as a wake-up call. You think you are being caring, but you need to take a look at that because you're not succeeding. You need to be able to get angry on their behalf to know that you're really in their corner. Now, if you are one of the sufferers out there, it's time to be louder about this need. Maybe not everywhere, but with the people who really are supposed to care about you, I say you go ahead and voice it. You deserve to have people who care about you show it. They can do it in a variety of ways, but being angry on your behalf is a major way they should be showing it. And if they aren't, you might consider that they aren't a very good friend, family member, work colleague, or whatever else they may be to you. It's time for us as a society to stop looking at anger critically, and instead to interpret it as a sign of what it is we care about. That's actually what anger is. If you want to help someone past trauma, the main way you can show them they matter is through appropriate anger about their suffering. Because in trauma, everyone is angry about what happened to them unfairly, of course. And what we all want is acknowledgement of what went wrong. Be angry on behalf of the sufferers of all kinds, and use that anger to effect positive change in society on their behalf. That is true empathy and true caring. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I'll get back to you personally.